Part 6. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kiseun Jeon. Chapter 51. Have you seen his file? Mu Kinjian's tone remained everlastingly cold and calm. Let people blend into her rhythm unconsciously. Can I see it? Lu Yan rolled her eyes. Your sister doesn't have enough authority. Ha ha. Mu Kinjian actually laughed out loud. I can only remind you, don't be fooled by his ordinary appearance. In fact, he is just like us. The files are sealed by the Security Bureau, do you understand? Lu Yan. Like us, insiders. But there are too many people in the circle, and the good and the bad are mixed. But he can let the Security Bureau seal the file specifically for him. Lu Yan's head almost exploded. Don't scare me. Lu Yan's face turned pale. Am I allowed to hear this kind of thing? Is there anything she doesn't dare to hear? Too much. For example, would you dare to listen to the illegitimate son of a certain boss? Don't think about it, it's not what you think. Mu Kinjian was amused again. In addition to being the same as us, it is mainly due to his personal reasons and ability. Lu Yan recalled what Mu Kinjian said to her when they were in the courtyard. At that time, she asked, are you trying to harm your brother by getting him to work for me? Mu Kinjian said, you won't say that when you know his ability. Understood. Lu Yan smiled bitterly, but you know what's going on here. What we do is an offending job. Supervising inspectors is not a good job, it is very offending. For example, they are responsible for supervising the nationwide special campaign to eradicate gangs and evil. For example, inspectors specialize in eliminating illegal and disciplinary behavior within the police force. Lu Yan is also in charge of the Severe Special Criminal Cases Task Force. Although there are not many people in this group, they have great power and authority. It can investigate, and supervise all major difficult and special cases across the country. For example, a major case occurred locally. The superiors gave a deadline to solve the case within a time limit. What if it can't be broken within the time limit? The superiors will come down. Let these people take over. This so-called superior is the Special Criminal Case Task Force. To put it bluntly, Lin Xian is now working in the Severe Special Criminal Case Task Force. It's the knife in the hands of the supervisory team. It doesn't matter. Mu Kinjian said calmly, if he likes to be a policeman, let him do it. If he is tired, he will go home. Go home? Is it your brother's home or your sister's home? Lu Yan is someone who has been here before, with a smile on her face. But she didn't dare to participate in this kind of thing. People like them almost have no say in the marriage. Whether you like it or not, the people in the circle are the future partners. Most of them are, well matched. Use him as an ordinary person from now on. Lu Yan smiled and asked, is it okay? No, but... Mu Kinjian hesitated a little, let him kill less, the smell of blood is getting stronger and stronger. Lu Yan. The whole person was stunned. What does kill less mean? The office of the Special Criminal Case Task Force is a very interesting place. Lin Xian guessed that it might be an office building or an independent courtyard building. But he didn't think about it. The office of the Special Criminal Case Task Force is actually underground. Underneath the building of the Longguo Public Security Department. I got on the special elevator with Wang Meng and conducted identification. You can feel the elevator sinking into the ground for 7 or 8 seconds. Pause. The elevator door opens. What came into view was a corridor with a door at the end. The moment you walk into the corridor, Lin Xian's pupils suddenly shrank, and he felt a sense of being spied on and in danger. Monitor. What else? Lin Xian's eyes moved quickly and scanned. 3 cameras were found in the hallway. He also sensed life-threatening danger on the walls of the corridor. When the two walked to the door, Wang Meng lowered his head and put one left eye close to the door mirror. Lin Xian could see red light and shadow sliding across Wang Meng's eyes. Iris recognition? Playing with such technology, Lin Xian was surprised. Ding! A door slid open automatically, revealing a hall. It's not very big, about 100 square meters. There is no one at all. There was only a young man sitting at a desk. Listening to the exciting music, fingers of both hands are flying, typing on the keyboard. The strange thing is that Lin Xian did not find the mouse. I couldn't help but feel moved. In his previous life, he had participated in a case of arresting network hackers. I know that real computer masters rarely use a mouse. Unlike ordinary people, if you leave the mouse, it's like you have no arms. If you tell ordinary people, they won't believe it and think it's nonsense. Are you a computer expert? Lin Xian took a look at the young man. He looks about 24 or 5 years old, unkempt and unshaven. The oily short hair must have not been washed for a few days. He was wearing a pair of black-rimmed glasses and a lewd smile. "Tou, are you back?" The young man turned his head and glanced at Wang Meng, grinning but did not get up. He looked at Lin Xian curiously, but his hands did not stop. Do two things at once. Zhan Xiaoyang. Wang Meng nodded to the young man and introduced to Lin Xian, I am very good at computers. I used to work in network security. He joined our task force 3 years ago and is responsible for information collection, analysis, cracking, etc. Lin Xian said hello, brother Zhan, I'm Lin Xian, please take good care of me in the future. New guy. Zhan Xiaoyang's eyes lit up, welcome, by the way, do you have a girlfriend? Lin Xian? What's wrong with this guy? How come he starts asking others if they have a girlfriend? Could it be that he has the habit of being a thief? What are CAO's hobbies? I like wives. Wang Meng on the side twitched the corner of his mouth and cursed with a smile, get out of here, how is the investigation of Old Han and the others' case? No progress. Zhan Xiaoyang shook his head, it's quite tricky, but it shouldn't be supernatural. Case. Tricky. Supernatural. As a police officer, Lin Xian is extremely sensitive to these terms. It seems I won't be able to introduce you to other team members for a while. Wang Meng frowned and said to Lin Xian, just in time, you should familiarize yourself with your work during this period, and try your best to adapt to our future work. Subsequently, Wang Meng began to introduce to Lin Xian the main work of the Severe Special Criminal Case Task Force. In fact, their job is very simple. Investigations across the country. Wherever there are difficult cases that cannot be solved, they may be involved in the investigation. Those who don't understand may say, isn't this nonsense? There are too many cases happening every day across the country. Can the Special Task Force on serious criminal cases come over? But the problem is, reality is not a movie, and it is not Gotham City. Where are there so many major, important, and special cases? Even if there is, do you think that other police officers are fools and can't solve the case? So, there are very few cases that can be taken over by the Special Criminal Case Task Force. Therefore, any case that can be taken over by the Special Criminal Case Task Force, the difficulty of detecting it is beyond ordinary people's imagination. After learning about these situations, Lin Xian became excited. For someone who dreams of being a police officer, isn't this paradise? Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun Zhong. Chapter 52. Wang Meng led Lin Xian to get familiar with the office of the task force. Small but complete. 2 offices, 2 lounges, office hall, archives room, weapons depot, shooting training room, canteen, bathroom. Only then did Lin Xian know. he is a newcomer to the Special Criminal Case Task Force. There are only 9 people in total. Is this still a department-level department? You don't have a gun license yet, do you? Wang Meng said, when the other team members come back, you will practice shooting first and pass the psychological assessment. Then I will take you to familiarize yourself with our weapons arsenal. Weapons arsenal? Lin Xian was confused. Is there anything special about the weapons arsenal of the Special Criminal Case Task Force? Then Wang Meng took Lin Xian to the archives room again. Here are stored some serious cases, important cases, special cases, and other files that the task force has solved in the past. There are 2 forms. One kind of computer storage, one kind of paper document. The computer is not connected to the internet. As for why, everyone in the know knows. After you officially go to work, first read the files and become familiar with our team's case handling methods, processes, and procedures for taking over cases. Wang Meng pointed at the computer. The power-on password is your identification code. Let me remind you that your personal identification code is confidential and cannot be told to others. Otherwise, I don't need to say more, right? Yeah, Lin Xian nodded. There's one more thing I want to remind you of. Wang Meng's expression was serious. While taking over the case, members of the task force are not allowed to go home, contact outsiders including relatives, and are not allowed to go out without permission. If any violation is found, not only will they be expelled from the task force, but also accept the review and be severely punished, and those who violate the rules will be punished with an additional penalty. Lin Xian's expression changed. I understand. Finally, Wang Meng took him to the kitchen. The so-called kitchen, it's hard to describe in a word. It is full of bread, instant noodles, prepared dishes, instant dishes, and so on. Seeing Lin Xian's weird look, Wang Meng smiled awkwardly and said, there is nothing we can do. All our task force are old men, and none of them can cook. Of course, if there is no case, you can also go out to eat and have a dinner together. What? Learn. Lin Xian grinned and expressed understanding. I haven't eaten for a day, let's eat something first. Wang Meng smiled and said, after I get familiar with the environment, I will go home and rest. I will officially start working tomorrow. No, I'm not hungry yet. Lin Xian shook his head. Boss, I just heard you and brother Jean say that we have a case in hand now, can I learn from it? This. Wang Meng thought for a while and nodded, okay, although the case is high level, it does not involve insiders, so it doesn't matter if you take a look. If insiders are involved, there must be a way to prevent leaks. The two returned to the office hall. Wang Meng pointed to a desk. This will be yours from now on. Turn on the computer on your desk. Use your own authority to retrieve a case file from a certain database. Let's take a look first. Wang Meng patted Lin Xian on the shoulder. If you don't understand anything, just ask Xiao Zhan. Zhan Xiaoyang, who was typing on the keyboard, turned to Lin Xian with a smile and nodded, then turned back to look at the monitor. Good. Lin Xian nodded, sir, please do your business. After Wang Meng left, Lin Xian sat down and looked at the computer on his desk. Use the mouse to open the file. Wait until he sees the file name on the file. Bewildered for a moment. Predicting future murders. When Lin Xian came back to his senses, he felt deeply humiliated by his intelligence. What's the big deal? Predicting the future? This is a special word used in supernatural science fiction novels. How could it appear in reality and in the case? Criminal investigation files. Case name, predicting future murders. Case number, 50701183. Criminal suspect, Ho Xinjiang. Time of filing, April 9, 2016. Case closing time. Unit that filed the file, Criminal Investigation Detachment of Pudong Branch, Magic City. The person who stood up the scroll. April 8, midnight. The 110 police station in Shanghai received an alarm call. The reporter claimed to be the watchman at a funeral home in Shanghai, claiming that he witnessed a horrific supernatural event. At the time of the crime, he is playing with his mobile phone. Suddenly I heard a woman screaming at the top of her lungs. That inhuman cry made his hair stand on end and shuddered. The reporter was frightened at the time, because at this time, there was only one corpse placed in the mourning hall in the funeral parlor. And himself, there is no longer any living person. The frightened reporter began to think that he had heard wrongly, because the scream only lasted for a few seconds and then stopped abruptly. So, he walked out of the room and went to the mourning hall to check. Finally mustering up the courage, the reporter picked up a shovel. He walked gingerly through a corridor and headed towards the mourning hall. However, he just reached the door. The reporter's face instantly turned pale and bloodless. He saw a figure wearing a shroud, standing in the mourning hall. He lowered his head and remained motionless, like a statue. My whole body seems to be exuding a cold aura. Seeing this figure, the reporter was immediately frightened out of his wits, because he knows it very well. This figure wearing a shroud is the corpse that was delivered in the afternoon. This was not the most frightening thing for him. What frightened him was the figure standing still. Suddenly, she moved. She slowly raised her head. The long hair covering her face was also shaking a little bit. In the fluttering of the long hair and in the gaps, the reporter saw an open eye, which did not blink, flashing a cold luster. Staring at him. Facing this weird and terrifying scene, the reporter suddenly felt a chill coming towards him and shuddered. He was so frightened that he collapsed on the ground. The fear in his heart also reached the extreme, and he rolled his eyes. He fainted and fell to the ground. I don't know how long it took, when the reporter woke up. Recalling the scene before fainting, he got up in fear. But he found that the figure in the shroud had disappeared long ago. A word came to his mind. Corpse transformation. In the legend, some people who had great resentment during their lifetime, after death, will be unwilling to rest in peace. When the resentment cannot be dissipated, it is easy to turn into a corpse. The reporter ran out of the mourning hall and the funeral home. Then he remembered to take out his mobile phone and call the police. Lin Xian stared at the file and saw this, thinking, what blinded my 24K titanium alloy eyes? Is this a file? Are you sure it is not a supernatural novel? The question is, which police dare to joke about the investigation report and file? There is another key. What is described and recorded in this file? What does it have to do with predicting future homicides? Lin Xian, with a puzzled look on his face, took a deep breath. Continue reading the file. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun Zhong. Chapter 53. The reporter called the police and the police arrived at the scene. The on-site investigation scared even the police. The reason was that they found the body through the investigation. It walked out of the mourning hall and the funeral home by itself. Isn't this nonsense? A group of old criminal investigators re-investigated the scene. Finally, everyone gave a unanimous answer. That's right, the body walked out of the funeral home by itself. A disturbing horror spread in everyone's heart. How is it possible? What era is it now? Animals are not allowed to become spirits. You told me that there are ghosts, corpses, and dead people can be resurrected? Then all the information about the deceased was placed in front of the investigators. Uziali, female, 29 years old, died in a traffic accident. Key points: Uziali and her family changed their nationality 6 years ago. They are foreigners and returned to China for work. After a simple autopsy, Uziali's death was confirmed. The police contacted her family and issued a death certificate. After the police negotiated with the family of the deceased, her family could only arrive in Longguo 2 days later due to visa issues. During this period, Uziali's family asked the police to keep the body properly. The family wanted to see Uziali for the last time, cremate her, and take her ashes abroad. As a result, the body ran away. Since there was no problem with Uziali's death, the police began to suspect that someone had stolen the body. The first suspect was the night watchman at the funeral home. But after interrogation, no problems were found. Other possibilities began to be investigated. For example, people that Uziali had contacted in Longguo, acquaintances, friends, colleagues. After an investigation, the police found something unusual in the studio of one of Uziali's friends. When this abnormality was discovered, everyone was horrified again. What did the police find? The previous reason was, this friend of Uziali was a cartoonist. He was writing a horror and supernatural comic. When a criminal policeman accidentally flipped through this comic, he was dumbfounded. Because of a certain plot in the comic. It was actually very similar to the process of Uziali's body disappearance case. It was also a woman who died in a car accident. The corpse was also sent to the funeral hall. Then the corpse resurrected and walked out of the funeral home. This comic also depicts the reporter, the night watchman, every move. The process and experience of encountering the corpse transformation described by the reporter are exactly the same. It seems that the cartoonist has personally experienced these scenes. However, a terrible problem arises. The storyline and plot creation of the cartoonist. It was completed a week ago. How could he know what happened a week later? It is even more impossible to know the every move of the night watchman in the funeral home. But, he just drew it. When the police interrogated the cartoonist, they told the cartoonist the whole process of Uziali's corpse being stolen. The cartoonist was also scared and trembling. The police could see that this was not a disguise by the cartoonist. He was really scared. Do you think the matter ends here? It is not. When the police launched an investigation into the content of the cartoon drawn by the cartoonist. You don't know until you investigate. After the investigation, something even more terrifying happened. As mentioned before, this cartoonist is a cartoonist who specializes in supernatural horror themes. He drew a total of 4 comic plot stories about supernatural horror themes. Each story is independent. However, the main storyline of the entire comic can be connected together. Uziali's resurrection is the 4th horror story. Funeral home supernatural events. And before that, there were 3 supernatural horror stories. Pond Ghost, Evil Ghost, and Ghost Paralysis. At the same time, in each of these 3 horror stories, there will be a death. No, it's 4 stories, all with the dead. When the police, with a skeptical and incomprehensible mentality, began to investigate according to the plots, scenes, and some signs, or some characters and plots in the comics, all the detectives were stunned. Because they found that the first 3 horror stories actually happened. It is extremely consistent with the plots in the comics. The cartoonist drew each story. Deaths occurred in 1 week. Faced with this strange and incomprehensible thing, everyone was scared. The cartoonist, who was a major suspect, was also controlled at the first time. He was interrogated again. But in the end, no results were obtained. The cartoonist was not found to have any motive or possibility of committing the crime. Because the people in the cartoonist's studio, relatives and girlfriend can prove it. It is impossible for this cartoonist to have time to commit the crime. Of course, the most incredible point. It is the performance of the supporting characters in the story drawn by the cartoonist. For example, how could he make the funeral home watchman discover the corpse transformation? All the expressions, movements, coma, exclamation, running out of the funeral home, calling the police, and a series of actions. A vivid restoration? And it was restored a week in advance. Is this something that can be controlled by human power? This is just like foreseeing the future. After that, the police conducted a thorough investigation of 4 suspected supernatural cases. But no results were found. The Magic City Police took the initiative to report and requested the dispatch of professional personnel to assist in the investigation. This morning, 6 members of the Special Criminal Case Task Force arrived in Magic City and began to investigate. This is why Zhan Xiaoyang said, "It's tricky, but it shouldn't be supernatural." Normal people definitely don't believe in anything supernatural. Let alone believe that there are really any supernatural events. Does Lin Xian believe it? This is bullshit. Do you believe that there are ghosts in the world, or do you believe that I am Qin Shi Wang? Don't say that someone has seen ghosts with their own eyes. Why have ghost legends been passed down from ancient times to the present? No one has come up with real evidence to prove that there are ghosts. China has a history of 5,000 years. There is still no evidence to prove that there are ghosts. Isn't it strange? Lin Xian leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. His brain entered a state of rapid operation. Whether it was in the past life or this life, Lin Xian likes to unravel the files. Then, chew on those subtle clues and details and make inferences. When all kinds of information and clues in the files are gathered in his mind, as various information is pieced together, the case becomes clearer and clearer. If, put aside the supernatural and incomprehensible aspects of this case, what kind of result will be obtained by simply analyzing the case? 4 cases, 4 lives, 4 murders. So, suppose there is a person who commits 4 crimes in succession. How can he leave no clues in all the cases? Let a group of top criminal investigators in the Magic City not find any abnormalities and suspect that it is a supernatural event? Suddenly, Lin Xian raised his head, his face solemn, and thought of a possibility. In this world, can anyone really commit a perfect crime? Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun Zhong. Chapter 54. Why haven't you left yet? A hand fell on Lin Xian's shoulder, and Wang Meng's voice came, "It's 5 o'clock, go home early. Don't disturb me." Lin Xian, immersed in reasoning, frowned slightly. This case is not right, one person can't do it, Suddenly came back to his senses, and then he remembered where he was. A newbie who just joined the special criminal case team actually scolded the team leader? This is a bit embarrassing, Lin Xian could only laugh dryly. At this time, Wang Meng and Zhan Xiaoyang in front of him. Both were stunned and stared at him. Not one person did it? Wang Meng narrowed his eyes and said doubtfully, "Are you talking about the case in front of you?" "Yes." To ease the embarrassment, Lin Xian changed the subject. "I have 2 guesses. The first is that the cartoonist has a problem. It is very likely that he did this case, but someone is cooperating with him to create evidence that the cartoonist is not present. The second is that someone deliberately created these cases for the purpose of framing the cartoonist. It is very likely that someone around the cartoonist, or someone around the cartoonist has a problem and is cooperating with the murderer to commit the crime. According to my guess, the cartoonist's ability to draw those plots is not necessarily what he thought of. It is also possible that someone deliberately made him think of these plots and then drew them." After listening to Lin Xian's reasoning, the 2 of them looked solemn. Zhan Xiaoyang opened his mouth halfway and was stunned for a while, then how to explain that when the night watchman at the funeral home saw the corpse, all the reactions were exactly the same as in the cartoons. This kind of thing cannot be controlled by human power. It is even more impossible for someone to precisely control a person's expression and movements and manipulate this person like a puppet. It is totally unrealistic. However, Lin Xian gave an answer that surprised Wang Meng and Zhan Xiaoyang. It can be done. Lin Xian's face gradually darkened. It's just that it is very difficult to do it. It cannot be completed in a short period of time. It also requires the person being controlled to open up and cooperate. Is there really such a way? Little brother, are you lying to us? Wang Meng and Zhan Xiaoyang looked at each other in surprise. Lin Xian said a word that made Wang Meng and Zhan Xiaoyang's expressions change: hypnosis. Some people may ask, does hypnosis, which many people want to learn, really exist in reality? The answer is, it does. But it is not as magical and exaggerated as performed in movies. Like a scene where you can hypnotize a person instantly by snapping your fingers. That is no longer hypnosis. That is a fairy method, a divine art. In reality, if you want to hypnotize someone, the person being hypnotized must fully cooperate and open up. Only the practitioner can successfully hypnotize and control the subject to do something. For example, the Heidelberg incident in 1934. A hypnotist used hypnosis to commit crimes for a long time. In theory, hypnosis can change a person's behavior and thinking. The subject will act according to the instructions of the practitioner. But there is a prerequisite. Hypnosis cannot violate the bottom line of a person's mind and morality. That is to say, even if a person is deeply hypnotized, the practitioner asks this person to commit suicide, kill people, kill relatives, and commit crimes. It is almost impossible to achieve. Because this has violated the bottom line of many people's mind and morality. When the practitioner forces the subject to do something that violates the bottom line of the mind and morality, the subject's psychology will resist, and it is very likely to leave the hypnotic state instantly. Hypnosis. Wang Meng and Zhan Xiaoyang widened their eyes. Unbelievable. Because hypnosis touches too many people's blind spots. Police are also ordinary people. 99.99% of the police also don't understand hypnosis. It's like when people do something, they are used to doing it in a familiar way. For example, eating. You are used to using chopsticks with your right hand. Have you ever thought about trying to eat with your left hand today? So, even if many people have heard of hypnosis, they won't think about it for a while. But when Lin Xian said this possibility, Wang Meng and Zhan Xiaoyang's eyes were wide open, and it seemed that thunder flashed in their minds. They almost forgot to breathe. My reasoning is. Lin Xian's mind entered the case analysis again, and he quickly said, for example, in a game, someone set the rules in advance, and the night watchman is the NPC set by someone in advance. Is it possible that he has been hypnotized by someone in advance, and when an abnormal situation occurs, he will enter a hypnotic state? What he sees is not necessarily true, but a scene produced under hypnosis. Is it possible? Wang Meng and Zhan Xiaoyang's eyes lit up instantly. If someone really knows how to hypnotize, it is very possible. How do you explain the corpse? Wang Meng asked the key question. It's impossible that the corpse really turned into a corpse and walked out by itself. You really think I can count with my fingers? Lin Xian, who was complaining in his heart, shook his head and smiled bitterly. You think too highly of me. I just read the files for an afternoon and didn't even go to the scene. I tried my best to think of these. Pa, Wang Meng slapped his forehead. That's right. I have never heard of a policeman who can solve a case just by reading the files and not even going to the scene. But Lin Xian can find a hypnosis clue just from the files. This is not just a little bit of awesomeness. Zhan Xiaoyang also stared at Lin Xian as if he was looking at a god, and gave a thumbs up. He was just about to shout, "Wow, awesome, bro 666. Let's go, I'll take you to the scene." Wang Meng said and walked out. Lin Xian? Are you serious? Do you know how far it is from Beijing to the Magic City? Brother, I'm optimistic about you. Zhang Xiaoyang gave a thumbs up again. Take my 50-meter sword and go and kill them. For some reason, Lin Xian regretted it a little. Speaking of which, is this special criminal case task force really a serious task force? On the rooftop of a business building, on the helipad, a civilian helicopter slowly took off and flew towards the Magic City. Lin Xian's face was not very good. After all, it was the first time to ride this thing, so it was inevitable to be a little nervous. It will be there in about 4 hours. Wang Meng, wearing a communication soundproof earmuff, said to his subordinates with a headset. You said I can go to work tomorrow. Lin Xian was speechless. As expected, the integrity between people. Just like the promise made by a scumbag to an ignorant girl. He refused to admit it after getting out of bed. Besides being a policeman, what other dreams have you had? Wang Meng asked casually to kill time. Yes. Lin Xian said seriously, according to my childhood dream, when I am my age, I should be a billionaire with a huge harem, instead of punching in and working every day as a policeman. Wang Meng. Little brother, it's dangerous for you to tease the leader like this. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun Zhong. Chapter 55. Night, 10 o'clock. Through the window, Lin Xian was overlooking the night view of the Magic City below. What comes into view is the endless high-rise buildings. Each building exudes a unique light. Like little stars, lighting up the night sky. When countless neon lights intertwined, it forms a colorful picture that makes people intoxicated. The helicopter landed slowly. Parked on the tarmac of the administrative building of the Magic City Public Security Bureau. Step off the helicopter. Lin Xian saw 2 young and middle-aged people in white shirts and 6 young and middle-aged people wearing executive jackets. Director Wang, welcome to the Magic City. 2 men in white shirts, smiling and friendly, braved the strong wind under the helicopter and came closer. You're welcome. Wang Meng smiled and shook hands with the 2 men in white shirts. Lin Xian was a little surprised. The 2 white shirts are both police officers of the 2nd class. Either the deputy hall or the main hall. But facing Wang Meng, the director of the capital, he kept his attitude extremely low. Is this the so-called Beijing official deterrence? Lin Xian's eyes fell on the 6 people wearing executive jackets. Just one glance, and his eyelids suddenly jumped. 4 of them had a strong aura of police officers, but they were not ordinary police officers. Lin Xian felt a little dazzling when he looked at those sharp eyes. On the other person, he smelled the smell of disinfectant and corpse. As for the last person, it made him feel danger. Now, Lin Xian had some understanding of his body that could be called a pervert after rebirth. Strong strength, great physical ability, super 5 senses, abnormal photographic memory, and even my IQ seems to have become stronger than in the previous life. If it simply refers to fighting, without using weapons, Lin Xian is confident of taking on the 12-man security squad led by Lao Wu. There is no need to say more about the strength of those guards. But now, someone could actually pose a threat to him and make him feel in danger. What the hell? Lin Xian's eyes were fixed on the middle-aged man. The other party was also staring at Lin Xian. A moment. Lin Xian felt a strong military aura in the man. But not like Lao Wu, but with a very pure military temperament. The middle-aged man also felt an aura from Lin Xian. A smell of blood that ordinary people couldn't smell. Human blood. So metaphysical? There is such a story, chicken killer. In rural areas, every household raises chickens. There is a family of big roosters, very ferocious. No matter it's the same kind, ducks, geese, domestic dogs, or even humans. It dared to go up and cut, and it was so powerful that it became a tyrant in the village. But on this day, a chicken killer came to the village to collect chickens. When the big rooster, who was usually fearless, saw the chicken killer, I was paralyzed with fear, screamed so much, and even chicken droppings came out from fear, but I didn't dare to run away. The rooster killer caught him honestly. There are many more stories like this. For example, dogs will become paralyzed and scream in fear when they see people who often kill dogs. There are also cows, sheep, horses. They will also be scared when they see the butcher, cry, and even cry out for mercy. Some smells and breaths that humans cannot sense can be sensed by domestic animals and wild animals. But there are also some people who have experienced some killings through some special training. Will have this ability. Beast sense. Team leader. When Wang Meng looked at the 6 men wearing executive jackets, they spoke in unison. They are all members of the Special Criminal Case Task Force. Lin Xian was surprised. But something is wrong. Why is there a soldier among my colleagues? He is also a terrifying soldier. Shanghai Public Security Bureau, a small conference room. There were only 8 people present at this time. All are members of the Special Criminal Cases Task Force. Let me introduce to you, Lin Xian. Wang Meng pointed at Lin Xian and said to the 6 subordinates, he will be our new colleague from now on. Secretary Lu specially recruited him, he is very capable. He deliberately emphasized the last sentence of very capable. Hello everyone. Lin Xian showed a sunny smile and looked at everyone. Then they shook hands one by one. Ji Yang, Park Wenhui, Zhao Deshan, Li Long, Lu Changjiang. When Lin Xian looked at the last middle-aged man who gave him a sense of danger, the other party reached out first, with a serious expression. Lin Xian smiled and held the other person's palm. He felt that there was a thick layer of calluses on the opponent's mouth and fingertips. His heart beat rapidly. Gun cocoon. The so-called gun cocoons are the calluses worn out on the hands from years of practicing gun skills. This kind of cocoon is very special and appears in a special location. For example, the tiger's mouth, index finger. When the middle-aged man held Lin Xian's hand, he was stunned. Slender, fair, and powerful. It would be a pity not to play the piano with this hand. I'm Guo Su. The man's voice was slightly hoarse and low. I would like to ask, what did you do in the past? Lin Xian blinked. I just joined the police shortly after graduating from the police academy. It seems that I have never done anything except being a police officer. Don't be ridiculous. Guo Su said word by word, you smell of blood. This sentence was said to Lin Xian, and also to remind his colleagues. This little guy has a big problem. As soon as this was said, the whole place was silent. The eyes of others all looked at the little brother. The most afraid of the air suddenly being quiet, Lin Xian twitched his mouth and gave an explanation. I solved 2 cases, shot several criminals, and won a first-class merit, so I was specially recruited. He didn't want to show off. But the aura is really something that can't be hidden. The eyes of the crowd softened a lot, and then they were a little surprised. How old is he? Not only solved the case, but also killed people. But no one asked, they just wanted to hear a reasonable explanation. Only Guo Su looked at Lin Xian deeply. But he didn't ask anything else. Okay. Wang Meng said at this time, we came here this time to find some clues. Then he briefly told everyone some of the reasoning that Lin Xian had said. When everyone heard about the word hypnosis, they were also shocked. In an instant, the way they looked at Lin Xian changed. That look seemed to say, we are all human beings, why can you be the best? Ji Yang, take Lin Xian to the funeral home first and investigate the scene. After Wang Meng gave the order, he looked at Lin Xian, see if you can find something. Yes. Lin Xian knew that this was not the time to talk nonsense, so he left the meeting room with Ji Yang. After the two left, suddenly, including Wang Meng, everyone looked at Guosu. On his hands, Guosu said something that made everyone's scalp numb, no less than 10 lives. Damn, Wang Meng and others took a breath of cold air and were horrified. What a joke. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun. Chapter 56. Night, 11:21. Magic City, a funeral parlor. Two policemen who were smoking were sitting at the cordon outside the yard, keeping watch. From time to time, they would turn to look at the funeral home behind them, with doubts in their eyes. In this day and age, everyone believes in science. But those legends of ghosts and gods passed down from generation to generation still remain in people's brain memories. Fake corpse? Evil dead? Even if they, as police officers, don't believe it? This kind of thing still makes people feel too metaphysical and weird. Especially staying late at night in a place where this kind of thing has happened. It can't help but make people a little creepy. Suddenly. Hello. A voice suddenly sounded behind them. Damn it, the scalps of the two police officers exploded instantly. The two jumped up from their chairs and turned around quickly. When they saw two people standing behind them, they breathed a sigh of relief. One is a handsome young man wearing a police superintendent's uniform. A young to middle-aged man wearing an executive jacket. One of our own. Sorry, I scared you. Lin Xian smiled and spoke. It's okay. The two policemen glanced at Lin Xian and nodded to Ji Yang. The special task force from Beijing has been here twice, and they have met Ji Yang. You can also guess that this is coming to investigate the site again, and let them go directly. Lin Xian and Ji Yang walked into the yard and walked towards the main entrance of the funeral home. When the door is opened, dim lights illuminated the surroundings, and the air was filled with an indescribable aura. I don't know if it's an illusion or something else. The two of them felt that there was a smell of death in the air, cold and strong. It was as if an invisible hand was tightly strangling the throat, making it suffocating. Coming here at night is quite scary, Ji Yang said in a low voice. Lin Xian smiled and looked at him. Although Ji Yang is not very handsome and not tall, his eyes are extremely calm and sharp. However, the accent is not from the capital, but rather from the south. How long have you been working in our team, bro? The two walked through the hall and entered a corridor. Lin Xian asked casually. Almost 5 years. Ji Yang is also a talkative person. When I was transferred to our team, I was still a little detective who didn't understand anything. This is humility. Those who can join the severe special criminal case task force of the Ministry of Public Security cannot be simple. The entrance to the morning hall. The two stopped. You can clearly see the abnormal traces marked on the ground by the criminal investigators. Those were pairs of footsteps, barefoot footprints. When he saw the footprints, Lin Xian's pupils shrank. His expression also changed at this moment. Surprised, dignified. Slowly squat down. 10 seconds later. Lin Xian murmured, dead man's footprints. The footprints are approximately 37 yards in length and appear to be female. Through the thinness of the footprints, foot shape, stride, and criminal investigation formula inference. The opponent's height will not exceed 165 centimeters and his weight will not exceed 55 kilograms. The reason why Lin Xian said footprints of the dead. Because of the same foot, the representation of the tread coverage of the plantar muscles of a living person and a dead person will be different. After death, the body does not remain in a state of rigor mortis. Rigor mortis usually begins 1-3 hours after death, resolves within 24-48 hours, and resolves completely within 3-7 days. The day the body disappeared mysteriously was exactly 3 days after the death of the deceased usually. If it is a dead person, the muscles of the corpse have been completely relieved, and the muscles of the whole body will quickly become loose. Not as tight as the foot muscles of a living person. Therefore, if the footprints are made by a dead person, the coverage will definitely be larger than that of a living person. The footprints left by stepping on them will be different from normal footprints. Right. Ge Yang's expression was solemn. This is the result that the criminal investigation personnel of the Magic City found. After we arrived today, we conducted a total of 2 inspections, and the same result was, the footprints of a dead man. Lin Xian almost couldn't hold back the curse words, and his heart went cold. It would be a lie to say that I am not afraid. He is also a human being, and he also feels a sense of horror in his heart. Uncontrollable adrenaline surged slowly, and sweat broke out on his forehead. Finally, I realized the horror that those criminal investigators felt after they investigated the scene. Wrong. Lin Xian shook his head. It's not necessarily a dead person, it could also be a disguise. He had already analyzed this case when he was in the capital. I also thought of a possibility. Perfect crime. There is such a law in the criminal investigation world. There is no such thing as a perfect crime. If it appears, it must be that the clue has not been found. But whether it is a perfect crime or infinitely close to perfection. Criminals all have one very obvious characteristic. They are smart, smarter than most people. And this vast majority of people also includes criminal investigators. To be honest, their IQ is much higher than yours. Anything you can think of, criminals can think of. Otherwise, how can it be perfect without letting you discover clues? We've thought about this too. Ge Yang smiled bitterly, but it's almost too difficult to do it. It's not difficult, so how can you deceive us? Lin Xian's eyes flashed coldly. If it can be done, it can only explain another problem. Is Yuzili really dead? He must be dead. Ge Yang rolled his eyes. No one dares to do anything like this. The corpses are all preliminarily autopsied by forensic doctors and confirmed by the police before a death certificate can be issued. Bodies without a death certificate will not be sent to the funeral home for cremation. If this problem occurs, from the police handling the case, to forensic doctors or hospitals and funeral homes, even anyone who has come into contact with this matter will be investigated to the end. The dead are the greatest. This sentence is no joke in the Dragon Kingdom. So, is it possible that Yuzili is really dead? Lin Xian's eyes flashed, but the body was switched and turned into a living person. Ge Yang was stunned. The thoughts in the brain are like boiling water, rolling and surging. Analyze various possibilities and finally come to a conclusion. It's possible, but the operation process is extremely difficult. Why? Ge Yang took out his mobile phone and pulled up a surveillance video. This video has been classified. Ordinary people, not even ordinary criminal police officers, have the right to access it. Avoid causing panic. When the video was called up, Ge Yang handed over the phone. Lin Xian took the phone and clicked on the video to play. Just watched it for a while. Suddenly, his hair suddenly exploded. The video was shot from the main entrance of the funeral home, and was also shot at night. It can be seen at this time. The door of the funeral home in the video suddenly and slowly opened. But the problem is, no one touches it. It was as if a pair of invisible hands pushed open the door. Followed by a figure wearing a shroud with disheveled hair took one step at a time. Came out. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun. Chapter 57. A person wearing a shroud. Step by step, slowly. Her appearance and demeanor were like a female ghost coming out of the underworld. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind blew up her messy hair. Her face was as pale as paper, bloodless, and her eyes were sunken, like two bottomless abyss. There was no trace of anger on his face, and he actually showed a smile. That smile was not only creepy, but also had a weird, twisted, emotionless sarcasm. Until, her figure slowly walked out of the surveillance camera. Video ends. Lin Xian was shocked, and his adrenaline surged to the critical point. I had a sense of déjà vu like when I was a kid watching horror movies. Is it played so realistically? Understand Ji Yang's purpose of showing him the surveillance video. Surveillance video has captured the other person's face. And this face is that of the deceased Yu Zili. But Yu Zili clearly died in a car accident. This was confirmed by the police and the medical examiner. If someone swapped the body, it would be impossible for someone to be exactly the same as Yu Zili, right? Even the best makeup artist can't achieve such a lifelike look. As for whether they are twins, the police have already investigated this. Although Yu Zili's family changed their nationality, their records in Longguo were kept. The birth certificate of that year, as well as the doctor's delivery, have detailed records. Confirmed to be an only child, not twins. Police ruled out the possibility of twins. Since they are not twins, makeup cannot do it? That's only one possibility. This is Yu Zili herself. What a hell, Lin Xian sneered. But I still don't believe there are ghosts in the world. He only believed what he saw with his own eyes. No, even if you see it with your own eyes, it may not be true. Anyone who engages in criminal investigation knows one thing. Sometimes what you see with your own eyes may be something someone else deliberately let you see. Yu Zili's car accident investigation report. Lin Xian returned the phone to Ji Yang. Help me look for it. Ji Yang used his authority to call out the traffic police and forensic doctors after Yu Zili's car accident that day, and filed an investigation record. Lin Xian read the investigation report and files carefully. Put down your phone and fall into deep thought. No problem. Yu Zili's death was caused by drunk driving and crashing into a truck, causing severe deformation of the cab, impact on the head, and fracture of the cervical spine. The most interesting thing is, the large truck was parked in a parking space on the roadside. It was Yu Zili who drove drunk, rushed into the parking space, and hit the large truck. Therefore, the traffic police determined that Yu Zili was fully responsible. During the car accident, Yu Zili died on the spot. After the preliminary autopsy was performed by the forensic doctor at the scene, he was taken away. There were no abnormalities during the entire process. It shows that Yu Zili is indeed dead, there is no sign of life, and there is no possibility of resurrection. Even if he is resurrected, he is not dead. He suffered a cervical vertebra fracture and will not be discharged from the hospital for a while. It can be said that whether it is death or life, it is impossible for a person with a cervical vertebra fracture to walk independently like a normal person in a short period of time. What's more, there is no possibility that Zili's body or a living person could be involved in the whole process. Did the package get dropped at the funeral home? Lin Xian raised his head and looked around the morning hall, his expression gradually becoming colder. Let's check. After Yu Zili's body was sent to the funeral parlor, who was there? His expression suddenly became dull, and his brain was running wildly. Recall the surveillance video I just watched. I saw Yu Zili's face in the video. There was no scar on that face, no injury. The crash investigation report clearly stated that during a car accident, Yu Zili hit the rear of a large truck and was hit on the head, causing her cervical vertebra to break. In that case, even if there was an airbag, Yu Zili's face wouldn't be intact, right? In the surveillance video, there were no signs of injury on Yu Zili's face. What's going on? Did anyone touch Xiaoli's body in the funeral home? Lin Xian looked directly at Ji Yang and asked quickly. Well. Ji Yang was stunned for a moment, recalling today's investigation, and then nodded. Yes, at the request of the deceased's family, we invited a corpse plastic surgeon to make up the deceased. Family request. Lin Xian's face darkened. Is it the funeral home that the family contacted directly? That's right, Ji Yang nodded. Suddenly, his expression changed instantly. You mean? There is a problem. Lin Xian's tone was cold. Find this corpse plastic surgeon, and check the cremation records of the cremation workshop that day to see if there are any abnormalities, and thoroughly investigate the entire funeral home. Ji Yang's expression became solemn. Understand what Lin Xian wants to do? Someone drop the body. Use a living person and replace the corpse. The person who swapped the corpse was most likely the corpse plastic surgeon. But transporting the body out will be troublesome and may even leave clues. The best way is to make the body disappear. There is only one way to make a body disappear in a funeral home: cremation. Thinking about the watchman again, it was suspected that he was hypnotized. This funeral home has a huge problem. 15 minutes later, Wang Meng arrived at the funeral home with his team members. When everyone saw Lin Xian standing in a daze in front of a morgue, no one bothered him. The Special Criminal Case Task Force has already taken action. A thorough investigation of the personnel inside the funeral home has begun. At the same time, a psychology professor is about to arrive in the Magic City. Psychology professor? After Lin Xian suspected that the night watchman at the funeral home was hypnotized, Wang Meng had already applied to dispatch an expert who knows hypnosis to assist in the investigation. It's just that they arrived in the Magic City first. The professor arrived a little later. Unknowingly, the sky outside the funeral home gradually woke up from the deep night. A faint dawn light quietly sprinkled down. It was dawn. Lin Xian came back to his senses. He looked at Wang Meng, who had been standing aside. He asked, "Boss, have you found the body plastic surgeon?" "No, the other party is not a body plastic surgeon at the funeral home at all." Wang Meng's face was so cold that it could scrape off a layer of ice. Lin Xian's expression was calm. It seemed that he was not surprised by this answer. He continued to ask, "Has the night watchman checked it?" "Yes." Wang Meng nodded. "It has been confirmed that she was hypnotized." "There is also a problem in the cremation workshop, right?" Lin Xian sneered. "Yes." Wang Meng stared at his subordinate in front of him with a complicated look. "Just as you guessed, one more body was cremated yesterday. The whole funeral home has problems, but..." Lin Xian's expression became a little strange. "Who is the woman who left the funeral home? Is Yu Xiaoli really dead? If not, who died at the scene of the car accident? The other party set up such a big game. What is the purpose?" Lin Xian thought for a moment with a gloomy face. "It's time to meet that cartoonist. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet." Author, Kisiun Zhong. Chapter 58. Magic City Public Security Bureau, Criminal Detention Room. This type of detention room is different from a detention center. Some suspects involved in serious crimes are held in solitary confinement under the personal supervision of criminal investigators. Most of them are set up within the case-handling agencies to facilitate interrogation of suspects at any time, or to go out to cooperate in investigation and handling of cases. The metal door slowly opened. Lin Xian walked into the detention room. What catches the eye is that the floors and walls inside are very special. They are all made of anti-collision soft package rubber layer. In this kind of environment, it can effectively prevent suspects from colliding with walls and floors due to emotional excitement, uncooperation and other reasons, and cause physical injury or increase psychological burden, affecting the investigation and handling of the case. Lin Xian's eyes fell on the dining table indoors. There are also plates and tableware placed after the meal. These plates and cutlery are also made of special materials. No matter how you break, pull, knead, or pinch it, there will be no sharp angles. Even if you eat them, they can be digested quickly. No physical harm will be caused to the suspect. This is a magical city, but it's rich. Lin Xian's eyes were opened. Looking away from the table, he looked towards a single bed and looked at the man sitting on the bed. The man looked about 30 years old, with deep exhaustion and helplessness in his eyes. His face was pale and covered with stubble, and he looked unkempt and decadent. The shoulders are slightly hunched, as if they are carrying heavy pressure and cannot straighten. His eyes were fixed on Lin Xian. Expectation, panic, confusion, anger, the eyes are constantly changing. The first time he saw the man, his past criminal investigation experience and intuition told Lin Xian, "This man doesn't look like a bad guy." Some people would say that knowing people and faces does not mean knowing the heart. But there is another saying, noodles come from the heart. Bai Wenhua. Lin Xian stared into the man's eyes. "It's me." Bai Wenhua stood up, looking at a loss. "Can you let me go?" "Walk." Lin Xian smiled and said deliberately, "Do you think you can still walk out?" While speaking, his eyes stared at Bai Wenhua's pupils. His hearing was monitoring the other person's heartbeat. Then use micro-expression psychology to determine the suspect's next reaction. Result: "Why can't I leave?" Bai Wenhua became excited. "I'm just a cartoonist and I haven't committed any crime. Why are you locking me up?" Pupils are normal. The heartbeat is normal. The psychology of micro-expressions, normal. This result did not surprise Lin Xian. The same answer was given by the criminal investigators who originally interrogated Bai Wenhua. There is a high probability that the suspect has nothing to do with this case and may be innocent. If relevant. No matter how you disguise it, you can't fool the eyes of the old detective. "Are you really innocent?" Lin Xian pointed to the bed. "Don't get excited, sit down and talk." Bai Wenhua was stunned for a moment and took a few deep breaths. His flushed face gradually recovered and he sat down. "You know very well now that the 4 stories in the comic you drew have all really happened, and each story has a deceased person." Lin Xian continued to ask, "Can you tell me why the plot of your comic appears in reality, like predicting the future and drawing the deaths that will occur 7 days in advance?" Bai Wenhua opened his mouth, fear appearing in his eyes. His face was disturbed and he was speechless. "Look, you can't even explain it yourself." Lin Xian asked with a smile, "If you were a policeman, would you believe this is a coincidence?" This sentence seems to be saying, "Are you innocent? You don't have any idea? Everything is about cause and effect." It's like, would you take out 100,000 yuan and give it to a stranger for no reason? Or would you stab a stranger to death with a knife for no reason? Some bullies will say that, but lunatics will. But the problem is, a psychopath can actually make a clever plan and commit 4 crimes in a row just to frame a cartoonist. Why, this cartoonist stole your wife in his last life and still wiped out your whole family. Are you here to take revenge in this life? Don't make trouble. As the saying goes, everything depends on cause and effect. People don't love without reason, let alone hate without reason. Nor would you blame someone for no reason. I have not offended anyone, and I have no grudge against anyone. Bai Wenhua grabbed the short hair on his head and looked crazy. "Who on earth wants to do this to me, and why do you want to do this to me?" It is not difficult to see that he also wants to understand that someone is setting him up, deliberately making the comic scenes he drew into reality. The purpose is to involve him in these cases. There is a saying that goes well, if yellow mud falls on your trouser pocket, it is either shit or shit. No matter how you explain it, as long as others don't believe it, it's bullshit. Bai Wenhua's current state can only be explained in one sentence: what can I do? I am also desperate. Suddenly, Lin Xian asked with a smile, do you want to clear up your grievances? Well. Bai Wenhua suddenly raised his head and stared at the handsome young man in front of him. You tell me the 4 stories in the comic and all the plots of the entire comic. Lin Xianer was also staring into his eyes. Did you really think of it yourself? Bai Wenhua was stunned for a moment. He closed his eyes and showed a painful face. After a long time, he said one word: yes. Lin Xian's eyes changed. He looked at him with the eyes of caring for the mentally retarded elderly. The door slowly opened. An old man walked into the detention room. Hello, Professor Qian. Lin Xian smiled and greeted, pointing at Bai Wenhua, take a look and see if he has been hypnotized. Through investigation, there is nothing wrong with the people around Bai Wenhua. In other words, there was a mistake in his reasoning at the beginning. Lin Xian suspected that someone around Bai Wenhua helped complete the plot of the comics. As a result, it was not. If not, there is only one possibility left. Could someone have hypnotized Bai Wenhua? Put the 4 stories in the comics into his mind. Then these stories became his own thoughts. Then draw those 4 horror stories as if predicting the future. Is this reasoning valid? The old man in front of him is the psychology professor invited from Beijing. He is also a well-known hypnotist in China. He is also a master of hypnosis. At this time, the old man came to Bai Wenhua and carefully observed his eyes. Suddenly, he made a few strange gestures. At the same time, he was also observing the changes in Bai Wenhua's eyes and expressions. Bai Wenhua looked puzzled, thinking that the old man in front of him was a psychopath. A moment. The old man put down his arm and frowned slightly. He turned his head to look at Lin Xian and shook his head. Instant. Lin Xian was stunned in place, and his whole body was Spartan. Not hypnosis. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun. Chapter 59. Watching Professor Qian leave, Lin Xian fell into deep thought. Not hypnotized. This result came without any precaution and was very sudden. Could it be that the supernatural phenomenon of foreseeing the future really occurs? Otherwise, how to explain it? Don't tell me that a certain perpetrator saw Bai Wenhua's cartoons. Then commit the crime according to the plot in the painting. Time does not allow. For example, a paranormal incident in a funeral home. Uziali had a drunken car accident, hypnotized a funeral parlor watchman into being hypnotized, pretended to be a plastic surgeon to package the body, and controlled the personnel in the cremation workshop to incinerate the victim's body. Everything needs to be completed in 7 days. Don't talk personally. We will give you a professional team to make everything seamless within 7 days. Not enough time. The only answer can only be that it was planned for a long time. 10 days, a month, or even longer. Professor Qian also told Lin Xian clearly. If you want to completely hypnotize a person within 7 days, you can do it. But within 7 days, the subject must be commanded to do something through hypnosis. Absolutely impossible. Movies don't even dare to act like this. That is no longer hypnosis, but controlling a person's body and mind. So, is there a way to do it? Yes, it will take at least a month, maybe even longer. To achieve continuous and uninterrupted hypnosis, it is possible to perform hypnosis every day. The Heidelberg incident that shocked the world. A certain hypnosis master used this method to hypnotize people for a long time. Only in this way can we control the victim and commit the crime. Since it cannot be done within 7 days. This shows that someone did not start committing crimes after reading Bai Wenhua's comics, but before. Since Bai Wenhua was not involved, he did not lie. Someone who had no contact with the whole incident. He came up with the plot of the comic himself. Could it be? Can Bai Wenhua really predict the future? Absolutely impossible. Lin Xian stared at Bai Wenhua sitting on the bed. Look at me. Bai Wenhua looked at Lin Xian in shock. Ask you again. Lin Xian said word for word, did you come up with the 4 horror stories in the comic yourself? Bai Wenhua was stunned for a moment, then nodded without hesitation, it's me. Still no lies, no abnormality. Lin Xian's balls ached slightly. What to do? His strong desire to solve the case made him calm down quickly. Turn around and walk out of the detention room. There is no way. Then find the second way. The future murder case involved a total of 4 deaths. In addition to the paranormal incidents at the funeral home, there were 3 other incidents. The innocent soul in the pond, the evil ghost demanding life, the ghost pressing down on the bed. The Special Criminal Case Task Force is led by Wang Meng. Conduct a comprehensive investigation into the paranormal incidents in the funeral home. But Lin Xian had already guessed the result. Even if something is found, the perpetrator will not be found. Lin Xian has never been a person who likes to get into trouble. Such as this time. He and Ji Yang appeared in a community and stood in front of a residential building. Yuan Quiling, female, 30 years old, from Shanghai. The ghost pressed the bed incident, the deceased's wife. On the 2nd floor, in front of room 202. The door opens. A woman with a haggard face looked at the 2 people outside the door and asked suspiciously, who are you looking for? The woman is Yuan Quiling. Police. Lin Xian took out his police card. Unexpectedly, when Yuan Quiling heard that they were the police, her face suddenly showed anger. What are you doing to come to me? Do you not believe what I say? Lin Xian and Ji Yang's expressions changed slightly. I think the other party misunderstood them as the police from Shanghai. Half a month ago, early in the morning, the 110 police station in Shanghai received a call from Yuan Quiling. At that time, Yuan Quiling cried hoarsely and said to the police officer, her husband is dead. Killed by a ghost. As expected. The police officer who responded thought that someone was calling a false alarm, and even thought that the person who called the police was a lunatic. Ghosts kill people? How could anyone believe this? But since someone calls the police, it may involve casualties. The police will immediately dispatch the nearest case handling unit and dispatch the police. When 2 police officers and 2 auxiliary police officers arrived at the scene, the deceased was indeed found. The deceased was Yuan Quiling's husband. But the bodies were already cold and had spots on them. The medical examiner then arrived to conduct a preliminary autopsy. The time of death was determined to be approximately midnight. Cause of death, cardiac arrest, respiratory failure. Disease caused natural death, excluding homicide. After hearing the forensic doctor's autopsy results, Yuan Quiling yelled like crazy. She said that her husband did not die of natural causes at all, but was killed by a demon. He also said that Li Gui was a woman and pinned her down on the bed last night, unable to move. She watched helplessly as the evil spirit killed her husband. The people present looked at Yuan Quiling as if they were looking at a mentally ill person. Because her husband died, no one bothered her. There were also 2 police officers who comforted and enlightened him. But Yuan Quiling insisted that her husband was killed by ghosts. The police and forensic doctors at the scene were helpless, perhaps worried that there was something fishy about the case. Conduct a comprehensive inspection of the site. Finally, it was concluded that there were no signs of homicide. Plus, the forensic doctor took the body back for a comprehensive autopsy. The result was still natural death. Once again, the possibility of homicide was ruled out. As for Yuen Quiling, the police believed that her husband died due to excessive stimulation, which led to mental disorder. They could only notify her relatives to come to the scene and arrange the deceased's funeral. After all, no one likes to deal with mental illness. No matter how much Yuen Quiling made a fuss, the police didn't pay much attention. Until the predicted future homicide case appeared. Everyone was not calm. Because the comics drew ghost pressing on the bed. The plot was exactly the same as what Yuen Quiling said. Besides, it was a coincidence. Whose IQ is being insulted? When the police re-investigated the ghost pressing on the bed incident, the result was still the same as half a month ago. The deceased died of natural causes. Can I ask you a question first? Lin Xian smiled and said, then I will answer you, should I believe you? Yuen Quiling was stunned, what do you want to ask? Before your husband died of sleep paralysis. Lin Xian stared into her eyes, do you believe in ghosts? Yuen Quiling was stunned. Did she believe in ghosts in the past? Nonsense. She is a normal person, an atheist, how could she believe? But your expression has already told me the answer. Lin Xian's smile disappeared, we are the same as you in the past, we have never seen a real ghost. Put yourself in your shoes, why do you want us to believe you and think that there are ghosts in the world? Yuen Quiling was stunned. Yes, she didn't see her husband die at the hands of a ghost. If someone told her there was a ghost, she wouldn't believe it either. Since you don't even believe it yourself, why do you want others to believe it? Then what are you doing here? Yuen Quiling looked painful. Unexpectedly, Lin Xian said something that stunned her. We'll help you catch ghosts. Solving the case is a little bitter, but my sister is super sweet. Author, Kisiun Zhong. Chapter 60. Yuen Quiling looked at Lin Xian in front of her with a face full of doubts about life. Just before, she said that she didn't believe what I said and didn't believe that there were ghosts in the world. Then she said that she would help me catch ghosts. Are you kidding me? Ji Yang, who had been silent all the time, couldn't help but twitch his mouth a few times. He looked at the little brother with a strange look in his eyes, and almost couldn't control his expression. What are you looking at? Lin Xian winked at his colleague. Ji Yang. You look at me, don't you want to anal me? I do want to help you catch ghosts. Lin Xian looked at Yuen Quiling who was stunned, but it's not the kind of ghost you think. Is it human? Yuen Quiling frowned and didn't understand. I'll explain it later. Lin Xian looked strange. First, tell me about your encounter with the ghost. One day half a month ago. The night fell and the bedroom was silent. Yuen Quiling suddenly felt a chill in her sleep and her whole body was cold. Half asleep and half awake, she opened her eyes slightly. The moonlight shone through the half-drawn curtains, casting mottled shadows. The bedroom was filled with a gloomy and terrifying atmosphere. A cold wind came in from somewhere, carrying a gloomy breath. Yuen Quiling shuddered and wanted to get up to check. Then, she was stunned. She felt as if a 1,000-pound weight was pressing on her body. Her hands, feet, chest, and even her whole body. They were all imprisoned by the invisible weight and could not move. At this moment, a series of creepy sounds rang in Yuen Quiling's ears. The body could not move, but the eyeballs could move. When the eyes looked slightly towards the source of the sound, Yuen Quiling was stunned. Or she was shocked by the scene in front of her. There was a figure sticking to the ceiling above her head like a gecko. It was a woman in red clothes and red pants. Her hair, hands, and feet were hanging in the air. Her body was attached to the ceiling. What frightened Yuen Quiling was the woman's face. This face could no longer be called a face. It was red, bloody, and had no facial features. It looked like a ball of minced meat. Facing this face, Yuen Quiling was so frightened that she almost lost her soul. Her eyes were not only filled with fear, but she also wanted to scream. However, she could not even open her mouth except for her eyes. At this moment, the woman on the ceiling actually floated down. With a cold breath and a chilling weirdness, she fell on Yuen Quiling. That bloody face without facial features was so close. Yuen Quiling stared at this face with her eyes fixed, her heart almost jumped out of her throat, and a chill covered her whole body. She found that she couldn't even breathe. She was pressed down by the faceless woman on her body. Yuen Quiling was clearly terrified and frightened. She wanted to faint and escape from the terror. At this moment, she thought of the legend of the older generation. Ghost pressing on the bed. Suddenly, Yuen Quiling saw the faceless female ghost on her body raised a pale palm and stretched it towards her side. What was she going to do? Suddenly, Yuen Quiling widened her eyes and thought of something. She looked around. She saw her husband. No. Yuen Quiling wanted to struggle, wanted to lift the female ghost on her body, wanted to stop it. But she couldn't do anything. She could only stare at the ghost hand and grab her husband. Slowly, the palm fell on her husband's mouth and nose. Cover it? No. Don't, please. Yuen Quiling was shouting silently, and 2 lines of hot tears flowed from her eyes. She watched the hand and watched her husband struggle under it. But her husband was shaking all over, but he couldn't get away from the ghost hand. Gradually, Yuen Quiling saw her husband gradually become weak from violent shaking, and then trembled slightly. Until, no movement. Even his chest stopped rising and falling. No sound. No. Yuen Quiling was desperate and screaming silently. At this moment, she was so helpless and sad. Watching her loved ones die in front of her. The heart-wrenching pain made her burst into tears. Finally, she fainted in the despair of pain. The coma seemed to be just a moment. Yuen Quiling opened her eyes again in an instant. She found that she seemed to be able to move. She stood up suddenly. The birds outside the window cried, breaking the tranquility of the early morning and adding a bit of weird atmosphere. The air in the bedroom was still filled with a gloomy coldness, which made people feel chilly. Yuen Quiling came back to her senses and looked around. She hoped that last night's experience was just a dream. However, when she saw her husband's gray face beside her, she saw the dark red and dark purple patches on his face. Yuen Quiling covered her mouth with her hands, tears rolling down. It turned out that it was not a dream. Lin Xian looked at the woman in front of him who was crying. Nothing was wrong. No lies. Micro-expression psychology told him that everything this woman said seemed to be true. Be more confident, remove the seemingly. Lin Xian was in pain. That cartoonist Bai Wenhua was like this. Yuen Quiling in front of me is still like this. No one is lying, no one is pretending. Since they are all normal. Is it me who is abnormal? If Lin Xian is a strong-mouthed king who is good at speaking sweet words, he really wants to curse at this time. This can't go on. Go and ask Professor Qian to come up. Lin Xian said to Ji Yang. A few minutes later, Professor Qian came into the house. When he looked at Yuen Quiling who was in a sad state, he was stunned for a moment. Strange, her mental state is not right. Instantly, Lin Xian and Ji Yang's eyes lit up. At this time, Professor Qian came to Yuen Quiling. Girl, please take a look at me. Yuen Quiling, with tears in her eyes, raised her head and looked at the old man in front of her. Suddenly, Professor Qian made a few strange gestures, and a soft voice came out of his mouth, with a certain fixed frequency, and said softly, I can see that you are very tired now. You haven't rested for a long time. If this happens, your body will not be able to bear it. Now, look at my gestures. Yes, look at it. Do you feel a lot more comfortable? Relax, that's right, relax, inhale, exhale, Very good, do you feel relaxed? Now, slowly close your eyes, take a deep breath, and then exhale slowly. Yes, very good. You are very tired now, you need to sleep, relax, don't think about anything, inhale, exhale. Lin Xian and Ji Yang stared at the scene in front of them, and saw it with wide eyes. Yuan Quiling's body slowly slumped, as if her soul was taken away, and she leaned on the sofa. Two words popped into their minds. Hypnosis. How is it possible? Professor Qian obviously didn't know Yuan Quiling. This was the first time they met, how could hypnosis succeed in an instant? At this time, Professor Qian showed a solemn expression on his face and said something. Like the night watchman at the funeral home, she has been hypnotized for a long time.